Jumping into MBTI, it is important to truly understand what personality type is. MBTI started with a theory of personality type which was developed by Carl Jung, where he explained that there were some normal differences between psychologically healthy individuals. He then identified that this difference in behavior resulted from the inborn tendencies, which we call nature, and the way that individuals were raised and their environment, the nurture. We then act on these tendencies. These kinds of tendencies develop into our behavior. Young determined that when people's minds were active, they were involved within two mental activities. They were either taking in information called perceiving, or they were organizing information or coming to a conclusion called judging. He then identified that there were two opposite ways that people perceived. He called them sensations. Myers and Briggs later renamed this to sensing, but determined that that was also intuition. In contrast, the opposite two ways people judged were thinking and feeling. Additionally, there is a way that individuals focus their energy. Young noticed that people tended to be more energized by their external worlds, including experiences, people, activities, and emotions, or the individual may be more energized by the internal world, including ideas and memories. He called these two orientations extroversion and introversion. Extroverted individuals look outside of the world or outside of themselves to get their energy. Introverted individuals will get their energy more from the inside through things such as reflection. Mental processes are also called functioning pairs. There are four mental processes: sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling. These are predictable characteristics that are going to be a little bit different for each person, and especially going to be different when comparing an extrovert to an introvert. There are eight mental functions, combining our orientations with the world, perceiving and judging with these four mental processes. We can see that there are fundamental patterns of mental activity occurring within people. Perceiving people recall the way that individuals are taking in information would either occur through an extroverted methodology of sensing and intuition or an introverted methodology of sensing and intuition. Judging personality types are also divided into these four mental processes: an extroverted methodology of sensing and intuition, or an introverted methodology of sensing and intuition. These mental processes are used by everyone and they're available to all personality types. Recall that every individual has an innate preference or a desire, a natural means of processing. This natural preference is going to lead the functions over all the others. It's going to direct the energy to them and help them in the development of their behavior and personality issues and patterns. These preferred mental processes are called a dominant function by Carl Jung. These preferred functions or processes make individuals unique but also enable the prediction of patterns of behaviors which forms our personality type. Jung focused on accurately describing these 16 personality types and the associated functions or mental processes, but he also noted that people used functions in a hierarchy of preferences. He called them the dominant function, auxiliary, tertiary, or inferior function. Sometimes it's also called the fourth function. Myers and Briggs developed this idea further, sharing how we have extroverted and introverted functions. For example, the ISTJ personality type uses the dominant function of sensing. However, this function tends to be introverted, meaning that others don't tend to see this sensing function. Instead, others are going to see the auxiliary function of thinking, which is extroverted, despite the ISTJ's preference to use the sensing the most. Each type is going to have a hierarchy of type and preferred method of dealing with their functions and mental processes. It is important to know that preferences are not an either or option, they are on scales. Think of the scales as a spectrum. An individual may be a little bit extroverted and a lot introverted, meaning that they're going to have to practice or use extroversion in certain situations like work or school. But these experiences are going to tire them quickly. The introvert will then retire to a quiet location to recharge and re energize themselves. When looking at the scale, think of a line with the different processes or attributes on either side, opposite of each other: extroversion and introversion, sensing and intuition, feeling and thinking, perceiving and judging. Let's look at extroversion and introversion as an example. An introverted individual who has some extroverted tendencies may have a focus of energy that looks something like this on the scale, closer to the introversion side. But what if the individual were to be more extroverted and find themselves infrequently needing that peace and quiet? Their focus of energy would appear more toward the end of the extroverted side of the spectrum. Of course, there are also individuals that are balanced, almost exactly between each side of the scale. Therefore, we cannot say that individuals are 100% extroverted or introverted. There are no absolutes. This principle of scales or spectrums applies to each of the functions. This is also what leads to the unique differences between the individual personality types.